Well, I think that the first major challenge has to do with government's commitments, to dealing with terrorism. And I think that it's also because terrorism is a new phenomenon. It's a new form of violent crime. Under normal circumstances, the Nigerian police and the security forces, generally have not been well equipped enough or trained to deal with common crime. And so when we are confronted with a new form of crime that requires some special skill, our government appears to be caught unawares, and coupled with the fact that there doesn't seem to be any genuine commitment on part of the government to train, to equip, and to motivate the security forces to be able to deal, effectively with the challenge of terrorism in Nigeria. Yeah, you would notice that in the last 15 years of experimenting with democracy, with the return of democracy after 17 years of uninterrupted military dictatorship in Nigeria, starting with Obasanjo, there have been about 4 or 5 different presidential committees on police reform. The first one was set up in 2006 by Obasanjo, which was headed by Madami, and the second one in 2008 under Yaradua, headed by retired IGP, what's his name? I'm trying to remember his name. Then the third one, which is the most recent one, set up by the current president, Goodluck Jonathan, headed by Pari Sayande. So what we find is that government seems to be evading responsibility by setting up committee after committee without necessarily implementing the reforms recommended in those committees. If you look at the committee of 2006, you find that the committee set up by President Obasanjo went around the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria, conducting public, public hearings on police reform. And at the end of that committee work, they came up with a report containing far-reaching recommendations that, if implemented, there wouldn't have been the need for the subsequent committees that were set up by successive administrations. So what that points to is that government is not committed to police reform. When they set up committees, it's actually an attempt to evade responsibility, to waste public resources by providing job for their loyalists. Those committees are composed of people who are government loyalists, and it's an opportunity to provide job for them. It's not necessarily to address issues of police reform. And any police reform that will make sense has to address the issue of corruption and human rights abuse, because human rights abuse and corruption are the roots of increasing violence. Now, you find out that government does not seem to want to address. If you even look at the issue of Boko Haram, you find out that internal extremism, took a different dimension. The escalation of the Boko Haram insurgents was exacerbated by the extrajudicial killing of Yusuf Mohammed, who was the leader of Boko Haram, and that was what led to the increase. And over the years, there have been cases of police abuse, extrajudicial killing, torture. Cases are not investigated, and even when investigated, no action is taken. So there's a culture of impunity. And so the Nigerian government, in spite of its acknowledgement of the problems with the Nigerian police and the criminal justice system generally, there doesn't seem to be any move towards addressing those problems by implementing genuine reforms that will help to curb impunity and abuse and corruption. You see, the the reason that government exists is to, and this is also a constitutional, the constitution recognizes that the very reason that government exists is to, take care of the welfare and security of the citizens. Now, if we have to assess government based on that criteria, welfare and security, it will not be difficult to conclude that this government has failed, because if running to several weeks, there is no clue as to where these abducted girls are. It simply means that Nigerians are not secure and cannot trust this government for security. And of course, when you also put into consideration the fact that the soldiers that have been sent to fight Boko Haram do not possess the equipment that will enable them to confront Boko Haram. It shows simply that government does not care, because we have had soldiers complain that their allowances are not paid. They don't have the weapons that they have cannot match the sophistication of the weapons being used by Boko Haram. So I don't know how this government expects us to trust that they can really secure this country. And it is really a shame that these girls have remained, under captivity several weeks after Nigerians have continued to call for their rescue. Any government that is responsive and sensitive would have responded to the massive protests and calls that Nigerians have made so far. But what we find is that governments, spokespersons of government have continued to, come up with this argument that Boko Haram is an attempt to distract the president. And I think that argument makes a whole nonsense of the government itself, because it shows that rather than sit down and think of how to deal with issues of security, government is busy thinking about those who are distracting them. It is the duty of government, because the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The constitution also centralizes operational control of the police in the hands of the president. So in any situation of failure on the part of the armed forces or the police, the buck stops on the table of Mr. President. And so it is the president that must be held responsible. And I think that Nigerians have continued to make this calls through protests, through all sorts of, protests, discussions here and there, rallies, and government does not seem to be moved. What it simply tells us is that this government has no clue. It has no answer to the insecurity in this country. And I think that when the government is incapable of discharging the basic functions of government, that government should simply, give way. And I think that if we had a legislature that is alive to its duties, I'm sure they would have also put some pressure on the government, given government condition, as to the need to ensure that not only that the Chibok girls are rescued, but that government addresses the increasing instability, insecurity, in this country. You see, that is the question that everybody seems to be asking, because I don't see why election had to be turned into a war front. Because the sheer number of security forces that were unleashed on Ekiti people was rather amazing. And if we had that number of security forces, I'm wondering why it is not possible, to deal with insecurity in the north. Because for me, election is not like a war front. Politics is not about, it's not about war. It's about service to the community, service to the people. So I don't see this level of, why this level of desperation? Because for me, what it simply showed was desperation on the part of, the party, the ruling party, you know, at the national level, because you find a situation where the president went to Ekiti State during the rally for the PDP candidate, and he said if the PDP candidate wins, that he will develop Ekiti. For me, that was a very irresponsible, you know, it was irresponsible. It was unexpected of a president, because he doesn't seem to be seeing himself as the president of Nigeria, but sees himself as, you know, president of PDP. So what that simply, and they had to send that number of security personnel to ensure that they intimidated the citizenry and win that election by all means. I think that if they can, you know, show so much desperation in dealing with insecurity in the north, I'm sure that we'll go further than where we are now. Yeah, I'm very much worried when I consider coming from the background of what we saw in ELECTIONEERING. You know, with the massive deployment of unnecessary massive deployment of security forces in ELECTIONEERING. I'm worried when I consider the saber rattling now between PDP and APC over how some PDP people will say we will overrun Osun the way we overrun ELECTIONEERING, which is an admission that they actually overran ELECTIONEERING. You know, and so what this means is that they have experimented with ELECTIONEERING. The chances that they are going to repeat same in Osun is very high, and for me, it's worrying. It's disturbing, because I'm sure that APC would also have gone back to do their own homework and may want to resist. So that raises the fear of possible, violence in Osun. I think that the president must put the interest of this country, before every other thing. The idea of trying to overrun, whether it is APC overrunning or PDP overrunning, I think that it is not in the interest of this country. I'm afraid about what, my prediction is that unless the president takes, shows, leadership and removes himself from these processes and allows things to go according to the rule, my fears for Osun is very high, and I expect that the INEC will also, conduct the elections in a free and fair manner. Security forces must remember that they should not be part of, politics. They should support, democracy without necessarily being part of politics. Because what we see is that the police appears to behave more like the security wing of the ruling party, and that is not the correct thing to do. The role of the police should be characterized by impartiality. It should be impartial, ensure equal security for every stakeholder, whether both the political parties, the electoral officials and materials, and the citizens in general. I want to caution that the president should ensure that Osun is not over-militarized the way EKITI was, because it may not work out the way it worked out in EKITI. Because I'm sure that APC people may not fold their arms and allow what happened in EKITI to repeat itself. Well, when the idea of the national confab, was mooted, some of us felt it was one of those attempts to divert attention from the issues of governance and the increasing demand from the people that the president should, show leadership. But so far, I think it's been good. It's been so good with as far as the conference is concerned. They have come up with quite a good number of recommendations. But of course, the problem with this country is not about recommendation. I think there have been quite a number of recommendations, even by previous, previous conferences. But what remains to be seen is what are we going to do with those recommendations. Is there going to be a new constitution? If there is there going to be a referendum for the people to decide what should be in the new constitution and what should not be? So what I expect is that at the end of the day, those nice recommendations that I've made should be reduced into a new constitution, because the constitution we have at the moment is not a people's constitution. We truly do need a new constitution. So I do expect that there will be a new constitution that will be, made legitimate through a referendum, which will mean that the people will decide what should be the constitution and what should not be.